Christy Waters, and I'm here today with Kim Bakaev, and we are going to be talking about a situation or a feeling that I think everyone's felt before, and that's the desire to belong. You know, we often think about teenagers and children having that desire, but even as adults, I can see so many people and myself struggling with that desire to fit in and find my place and have people that celebrate me and desire to be around me and just that right fit and belonging in a place. So I'm sure that the listeners can relate to this also. What would you have to say to them?
Well, that's been a struggle that I think if I had to identify the one of the many things that the Lord is trying to really work within me at this stage of my life is still, honey, why don't you get it that you do belong? And I've been trying to examine over the past several years, where did that come from? My parents definitely loved me, and I'm an only child, so I had all of their attention. I didn't have to share it with a sibling, but it was just this thing that I was longing for, to just feel like I fit in or that I belonged somewhere. Now, I come from a multicultural home. My mom is Korean, and where I grew up in Wisconsin, there weren't a whole lot of different minorities there. So I felt like an outsider a lot, and I just wanted to be like everybody else. If you have kids, especially middle school kids, I want to be different, but I want to be accepted like everybody else. And so I always kind of felt on the outside. And I had a very quiet home. My parents both worked, and so when I would come home after school, it was very quiet. It was me and Gilligan, spending a lot of time together. But there was a family in the neighborhood, my best friend's family, who was a stay-home mom, and they had a bunch of kids. She babysat kids, and all the kids in the neighborhood were there wanting to swim, and she made cookies, and I just thought, oh, that's what I want. I longed for that, belonging to something like that. So in fact, I was watching one of those shows, like the Brady Bunch or one of those shows, and I'd seen a scene where one of the neighborhood kids just walks in and was accepted as part of the gang. Mrs. Brady probably had him come right in and gave him a cookie and sent him out the back to play. And so I thought, I'm going to do that because that's what it means to belong, to be unconditionally accepted. And so I went up, and I'm probably about 8 or 9 years old, and I went up to the door, and one of the children who she babysat comes to the door, and I just walk in, and I'm reenacting this scene in this TV show. And he calls the mom and says, Kim just came in and didn't even get permission. Probably now that I'm a mom of kids, I realize she was probably exhausted having all those kids and thinking, she said, Kim, you can't just come in here. You've got to wait till you're welcomed in. And I just shut down. She didn't know it. I didn't run home and tell my parents, but I know the enemy was right there trying to say, see, your worst fear, you don't belong. You're not one of them. There's something about you that's not good enough. And so I feel like that lie, when I was just a little girl, that had nothing to do with my parents' love for me, the teachers I had, even the friends I had. It was just a very innocent remark from a mom who's probably tired, and the enemy came, and that became one of my foundational truths I believed about myself. So even now, as an adult with my own children, I still struggle with, wait, am I in, am I out? Even though the Lord is like, why do you keep doing this? I love you and you belong to me. But it's something that I have to battle every day. And I have a feeling that I'm not the only one.
Definitely not. And yet, God created us each so uniquely, and He desires for us to be that unique individual that He created us to be. And yet we find ourselves trying to fit in by looking like our peers, by reading what they read, going where they go, trying what they try, particularly in those formative years where everything seems like a good idea at the moment, possibly. So what would you tell a grown woman who maybe has not even recognized that in herself before, Kim? What if maybe they've gone along and done all these things, maybe they're even our age, and they've never identified that in themselves? How do we get past that being good enough in and of ourselves and not changing ourselves to fit in, to belong somewhere? What do we do with that?
Well, it took me a long time to even realize that because I just went through life, married in my 20s, children through my 30s, and just kind of numb to how I really even felt. But I was still being triggered by those sense of, feeling like, oh, I'm not wanted, I'm less than, and I have a husband who's very supportive and doesn't understand why I feel that because he thinks I'm great. I'm so thankful for, but it took in getting into my 40s to kind of examine myself and say, like, Lord, where are these lies coming from? And so one of the things that I do, and I encourage everyone to do, I'm trying to teach this to my children, is when there's a thought that comes and I'm feeling triggered or wounded, to stop in that moment and say, Lord, what is the lie I'm believing? Because this doesn't line up. This doesn't seem to match up with what you say about me.
That's really good.
And so to stop and say, where is this lie coming from and what is the lie? And he wants to speak. He wants to tell us, whether he speaks through your husband or through friends or just you hear his voice or in his word. He'll tell you, and it's amazing time after time that he'll speak, and I'll get the root of that. And so to say, okay, I forgive that mom who completely unintentionally, wounded me, and I forgive myself for believing that lie and not standing on the truth. And so it's just a process of daily being aware of what's the feeling and not giving into that and not allowing myself to, oh, nobody wants me. And so just saying, no, that is not true. Speaking it out and saying, no, I do belong. I belong to the Father, the King of Kings, my Creator, my family, my friends, and just, okay, and moving on from that lie. But that's a big part of just constantly being intentional about figuring out where that's coming from.
That's a fantastic tip. From the youngest to the oldest, we could all practice that for sure. But I'm here to remind you today, if you've made a decision for Jesus Christ to live in your heart, you do belong. You belong to the family of God, and you are his child, and there's nothing better than that. God bless you.
Second and third grade, my husband and I were